Hi everyone, and welcome to lesson 12, solving by completing the square. So today is the last lesson with completing the square. So today we're actually going to solve for the solutions. Remember those zeros of the parabola where the parabola hits the x-axis. So we're going to solve for those solutions today. And this will be the last major thing that we do with completing the square. So gathering information, as you saw in the last lesson, we went through vertex form. Okay, so vertex form, remember, gives us the coordinate points of our vertex. Okay, so the h value inside the binomial squared is your x value of your vertex, and the k value is your y. So whatever is inside is the value of your x, and on the outside is your y value. So just to review that. And just another thing to add to your vocabulary or just knowledge is the square root property. So square root property basically is when you take the square root of any value, you get two answers. For example, when you take the square root of 25, the answer is not just positive 5 because 5 times 5 equals 5. It's both positive and negative 5, right? Because when you multiply negative 5 times negative 5, you also get 25. Another example, square root of 36 would be positive and negative 6. Okay, just one more thing you might see when we're completing our lesson for today is if you have the square root of a number that's not a perfect square. Okay, so for example, the square root of 10. Okay, the square root of 10, if you go on your calculator, I'm going to do it on my calculator now, you get 3.162277766, right? It's an irrational number. It keeps going on and on. So we're not going to write this as a decimal because we want to be as accurate as possible. So when we take the square root of 10, we're just going to write it as the positive and negative value of the square root of 10. Same as if we would take another number that's not a perfect square, such as the square root of 3, right? That would be equal to the positive and negative version of whatever the square root of 3 is. Okay, so this would be the square root property. So you would get always two outcomes, right? Because when we have, I'm going to just draw here, say we have our x and y axes here, right? We get two solutions when that parabola, for most times, hits two places on your x-axis. So you have two zeros, two solutions. So that's why we have the positive and negative version with the square root property. So we're going to take a look at how this comes into play while we're solving. So say we already completed the square and we already have our equation in vertex form. So how would we solve for our equation while in vertex form, right? We want to solve for our x's. So the first thing you want to do is you want to try to get x isolated by itself, right? So if I see here, I can move this negative 26 to the other side. So this is a negative 26, I'm going to add it to both sides. So this gives us x plus 4 squared equals to positive 26. Now, the issue that we're going to run into now is that we have this exponent of 2. So I'm not sure if you remember, thinking back to maybe literal equations, how do we get rid of an exponent of 2? What is the inverse? So if you remember, maybe you're thinking it, we have to take the square root. So just as a side note, right, the inverse of taking the square of squaring a number is taking the square root, okay? So that's what we're going to write as a side note. So the inverse of squaring a number is taking the square root. So write that down in your notes. Okay, so here we want to get rid of this exponent. So we're going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, so now when we take the square root, it gets rid of this exponent of 2 here for us. So we're just left with x plus 4 equals 2. Now, what did I say when we take the square root of number? We get 2 different answers, right? We get the positive version and the negative. Now, 26 is not a perfect square, so we're just going to leave it under the square root sign. So we're going to say x plus 4 equals positive and negative square root of 26. Okay, so there's one more step to getting x by itself, and that is to move this this positive 4 over to the other side. So since it's positive 4, we're going to subtract it. Let me write that better. We're going to subtract it on both sides. And the answer is going to look like this. X equals 2. Negative 4. Now you can't combine these. They're not, this 26 is in this the square root sign. So it's going to be negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 26. And this is going to be your answer. And this is how you would see it on one of our assessments, okay? So this is showing the 2 points that would be your solutions, okay? So let's do another few examples, kind of starting from the beginning with actually factoring first, then solve.